Hi, thanks so much for joining me on the Listen Up Girl podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randall Friedman. This is the podcast where I slow things down and I talk about headlines and talk about what they actually mean. So once a week, I've started a new special newscast where I'm breaking down a story that is resonating or is hitting headlines. And my special report today is about New York City because it's entered a new political era. And depending on who you ask, it's either hopeful turning point or a dangerous shift. So on January 1st, New York City officially inaugurated a new mayor, Zohran Mamdani. He's 34 years old, a former state lawmaker, a Democratic socialist, and a Muslim immigrant. And according to exit polls, the overwhelming choice of LGBTQ plus voters. But his election also ignited backlash from political opponents, conservative media, and even some New Yorkers who worry about how far left is too far. So today we're breaking this down from all sides. Why did Mamdani win? Why are people so fearlessly against him? What does his administration mean for LGBTQ plus and trans New Yorkers? And what does his inauguration say about the city he plans to lead? So let's get into it. So first, who is Zohran Mamdani? He didn't just appear overnight. Before becoming mayor, he served in the New York State Assembly, where he built a reputation as a bold and progressive, focused on housing justice, healthcare access, and working class New Yorkers. But his campaign for mayor took things further. It wasn't cautious, it wasn't neutral, and it wasn't trying to please everyone. Mamdani centered marginalized communities loudly and unapologetically, especially LGBTQ plus New Yorkers. That approach paid off. Exit polls showed that he received 81% of the LGBTQ plus vote, an extraordinary number in a city as politically complex as New York. Grassroots like Gays for Zohran forced organically, holding rallies and mobilizing voters not just around policies, but around the feeling that his campaign actually saw them. In an interview with Gay City News shortly before the election, the mayor said something that really stuck. My goal is not just to protect LGBTQ plus IA New Yorkers, but to celebrate and cherish them. That wasn't campaign fluff. It became the blueprint for his administration. So let's get into why people are against him. To understand the mayor presidency, we have to talk honestly about the backlash because it wasn't something that was not noticed. First, he was too radical, too fast, openly identifies as a Democrat socialist, and for some voters, that label alone was disqualifying. Critics warned that his policies would scare off businesses and real estate interest, expand government spending too aggressively, disrupt long-standing relationships with private institutions. Opponents painted him as idealistic, inexperienced, and reckless. For voters already anxious about inflation, crime narratives, and housing instability, those warnings landed. Next, the trans panic playbook. Let's not dance around this. A major source of opposition to Mamdani was his unwavering support for trans people. In backing of gender affirming care, trans student athletes, and LGBTQ sanctuary protections triggered national right wing talking points almost immediately. He was accused of endangering children, forcing ideology, putting identity politics first. These arguments weren't new, they mirrored the same rhetoric being used across the country to justify rolling back trans rights. Mamdani didn't soften his stance. Next, there was cultural discomfort. Mamdani represents generational and cultural change. He speaks plainly, he references queer culture, he doesn't perform political neutrality. For some New Yorkers, that was energizing. For others, it was deeply unsettling. So, why did LGBTQ voters rally behind him? Mamdani didn't just win, but he won big with queer voters. With a platform that wasn't symbolic, Mamdani released a 6-page platform dedicated solely to LGBTQ issues. That matters. His proposals included $65 million to expand and protect gender affirming care, $57 million for hospitals, clinics, and nonprofits, $8 million for telehealth care, aftercare, and home health care services, a city based gender affirming access hub, to help patients navigate care safely and affordably. This wasn't about optics, it was about infrastructure, holding hospitals accountable. At a time when private hospitals in New York quietly restricted trans care under the pressure from the Trump administration, promised action. His plan includes investigations in coordination with the Attorney General, public hearings, accountability for hospitals denying care to trans youth, and that stance alone earned him fierce loyalty and fierce opposition. So, next, let's get into a real LGBTQ sanctuary city. Mamdani didn't just promise sanctuary status, he defined it. His vision includes ensuring private information isn't shared with hostile states, protections for incarcerated trans New Yorkers, expanded housing, mental health, and legal service. And at the center of it all, a proposed Office of LGBTQIA plus affairs funded at $87 million. The office would coordinate LGBTQ policies across city agencies, expand LGBTQ plus liaisons, protect sanctuary laws, fund housing, healthcare, education, and legal defense. That's not culture war politics, that's governance. Then we go into trans youth sports and federal pressure. Mamdani has been especially clear about protecting trans student athletes. When the Trump administration threatened funding over trans inclusion, New York City refused to comply even after losing more than $50 million in education funding. Mamdani backed that decision fully. His message was simple: standing up for trans kids isn't optional, it's the job. He also pledged to deploy hundreds of lawyers to fight federal attacks on LGBTQ plus rights, a direct challenge of the national rollback we are seeing play out. Then on Inauguration Day, and why it mattered. Mamdani's inauguration wasn't just ceremonial, it was symbolic. LGBTQ plus representation was front and center at City Hall. One of the most visible figures that day was Bernie Wagenblast, an out trans woman who many New Yorkers already recognize as one of the voices of the New York City subway system. Bernie served as the MC for the inauguration, and I want to pause here because this is personal for me. I had the opportunity to interview Bernie, and hearing her speak about visibility, trans representation, and public life makes moments like this land differently. Seeing her out on the stage wasn't just symbolic, it was powerful. What her speech said is trans people belong here, trans voices lead here, and trans New Yorkers are part of the city's public life, not hidden from it. The ceremony also featured queer artist Lucy Dacus performing Bread and Roses and LGBTQ leaders woven throughout the event. Public advocate Jamon Williams delivered one of the most important lines of the day. The powers in place would rather create an other to blame. If we are divided, the status quo stands. That line alone may define Mamdani's time as mayor in New York City. And then we have culture, Madonna, and queer signals. Let's talk about the culture because culture always matters. Mamdani has openly talked about loving Madonna. That may sound trivial, but it's not. Madonna isn't just a pop star. She's a symbol of queer survival, trans visibility, and cultural rebellion. When Mamdani aligns himself with that legacy, he's signaling something important. The queer culture matters. That joy matters. The leadership doesn't have to be sterile to be serious. It's a reminder that politics is cultural, whether politicians admit it or not. And I love it that he referenced Madonna and Kim Petras. Like, amazing. That's what we need. We need someone that is young. He's 34 years old, and we need someone like this. We need more lawmakers at a younger age and not these 70, 80-year-old white straight men trying to run the country or run states. So Zohran Mamdani's election is about more than one mayor. It's about whether cities like New York will stand firm for trans people or quietly retreat under pressure. Whether LGBTQ plus support will be symbolic or funded, forced, and defended. And whether policies can still be rooted in values instead of fear. This has been a special report where I've talked about what's happening in New York City with the new mayor. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to follow and rate the show. Check back once a week because I will pick one story that is resonating and trending and break it down and give you both sides And because these stories don't end after Inauguration Day, and neither do we. Thanks so much for listening, and I will be back tomorrow with more LGBTQ plus news.